I invite you to join me with scripture reading, John chapter 2, verses 13 through 22. The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables. Making a whip of cords, he drove all of them out of the temple, both the sheep and the cattle. He also poured out over the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. He told those who were selling the doves, "Take these things out of here. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace." His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." The Jews then said to him, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews then said, "This temple has been under construction for 46 years. Will you raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking of the temple of his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word that Jesus had spoken. Good morning. By now, I'm sure most of you know me, but just in case, my name is Sarah Walker, and I'm a member at Park Lake and a freshly graduated high school senior. For years, I've sat in the congregation, watching annually as the seniors stood here where I am and shared some of their truth. I'm in many ways similar to them. Just like those former 18-year-olds who graduated before me, I would also like to thank my friends and family who have gotten me here. When first planning how I would approach my senior sermon, a long-standing tradition for Park Lake's Youth Sunday, I met with one of my youth leaders, Meredith Hampton, at none other than the Olive Garden on Colonial Drive. A random spot, you may think, and you would be absolutely correct. But after all, what is better for brainstorming than a side of Alfredo dipping sauce and a large Coke? We sat and hashed out some of the details and did get sidetracked talking about Taylor Swift several times. But by the end of the night, I had a good feeling of where to go with this sermon. I settled on boxes, and not the kind that my leftover fettuccine sat in that night in the fridge. I mean the idea of putting people into boxes, methodically sorting people into where we think they belong, hoping to give ourselves some sort of structure, an answer to our questions, an assumption of who they must be. Several years ago, around the time of my confirmation during middle school, as a youth group, we read the scripture about David and Bathsheba. This story, from my perspective, is often misinterpreted, blaming Bathsheba for David's behaviors or excusing them despite their atrocity. While at this time I didn't understand the weight of David's actions, likely because I was A, only 13, and B, reading a PG version of the scripture, I did know deep down that David was not doing what he was supposed to. And I made a comment to Meredith, one that has become an inside joke between us as well. I asked her, why wasn't he doing king stuff? This comment has become memorable to us, not only because of the hilarity of its poor grammar, but more importantly because of the truth within it. Too often we get sidetracked in our lives and fail to live up to our duties as Christians, to love, respect, and care for one another. Instead, we are quick to judge victims like Bathsheba in scenarios and ignore their perspective or fail to even ask for it. We often lack the ability to be open-minded to one another, and alternatively, choose to put each other into boxes, sure that we know the full story, have the correct opinion, or can speak for all involved. As a high school senior, I went through the painstaking yet classic college applications process. 13 applications and most of my dignity later, I ended the college admissions process with a good handful of acceptances, several pending wait lists, and of course, a few sad rejections. However, I think what amazed me the most about the college applications process was how much I truly felt like a statistic. I was, in fact, just a handful of numbers, a college essay, a couple of test scores, and a demographic to these admissions officers. After all, there was no way for them to truly know me. I spent my high school career focusing on what I could do so that some random person I would never meet could judge how I spent my time and decide if I was worthy enough to go to their university. What an upsetting idea, knowing that as decisions are made for these schools, thousands and thousands of applications are sorted through. Students are filed into different categories based on their experiences, academics, and qualifications. It all feels like some big game with very few winners. Easily the most difficult part about it was the knowledge that there was so much competition. I quickly became aware of my peers' accomplishments and how much better suited they were for the schools that we were both applying to. I felt terrible about myself despite the fact that I'd worked hard throughout high school, had good grades, and was involved in extracurriculars. It seemed like even if I had good intentions and did my best, I still wouldn't get in because there were just so many people applying. Upon reflection of the college application process, I began to truly realize how it parallels the way that we often perceive the idea of getting into heaven. The list of requirements, the petty comments regarding whether or not someone is worthy of acceptance, the filing people into boxes as if we can judge them for what we do not know. I think during these times it is important for us to remember there is no acceptance rate for heaven. Annually, the SAT class average for it doesn't go up or down. There's no GPA requirement. We are simply asked to love unconditionally, to look out for one another, to care for our neighbors, to try our best. Even if our best may not be good enough for an Ivy League acceptance, it is for God. So as you go out this week, I challenge you to look for opportunities to live a life that is impressive not by success, but rather because of your character. To act not with the intention of appearing worthy to those who you do not know, but instead giving your energy to causes that promote peace and stability to those who need it most. As I close today, I'd like to read a prayer by William Sloane Coffin that is a favorite in my family, one that has been stuck in my notes app of my phone for years, and one that my grandma's congregation ends every Sunday on. May God give you the grace never to sell yourself short, grace to risk something big for something good, and grace to remember the world is now too dangerous for anything but the truth, and too small for anything but love. May God take your mind and think through it. May God take your lips and speak through them. May God take your hands and work through them. May God take your heart and set it on fire. Thank you.